Hello and welcome. I'm Jeannie Allen, founder and CEO of the Center for Education Reform. I'm so pleased to present to you a special conversation with Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona about the wide and amazing pioneering innovations going on in education in the Grand Canyon State. Take a listen.
Aprendimiento, education, colaboración, collaboration. Every girl and every boy, una city on the boy deserves a darte fortuna to have an opportunity in la Piazza.
Governor Ducey, how are you? Welcome.
Very good. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
It is great to see you. And listen, congratulations on Arizona becoming #1 for charter schools again.
We're very proud of our charter school movement. We've done incredible work there. I think by a percentage basis and number of kids inside charter schools, Arizona leads the country, and those children are getting the results as well. So we know there's a path forward in K-12 education.
Well, you were #1 for a while, and then a couple of other states overtook you. So the first question I have to ask you is, what are you going to tell your colleague, Ron DeSantis in Florida?
Well, we welcome the competition, and of course, Governor DeSantis and the state of Florida is doing an excellent job on school choice. And I think the country is now being awakened to these innovations that were planted in places like Florida and Arizona a couple decades ago, and were seen as policy experiments, and now have come to fruition and are being really preferred by parents across the board.
Yeah, it is truly amazing. I mean, the landscape of charter schools, like what came to be as a result of them. Talk to me a little bit about how you saw that evolution. I mean, years ago, people in even the community that I represent on our side of education reform, if you will, now we call it education transformation. We're like, Arizona, it was the Wild West. They don't know what they're doing. There's too many people running around having charters. And then student achievement started to rise. What do you say to them?
Well, I like to think we're just getting started on school choice in Arizona and charters, but I also want people to know that this started 20 years ago. We have a colleague in common, and Lisa Graham-Keegan, who was the superintendent of public instruction, the former governor, Fife Symington. Mm-hmm. This was one of the policy innovations that they began. I think it started in maybe a couple other states, and it was bipartisan. In many ways, it was nonpartisan, but it had champions from both sides of the aisle. And it was after this report that we got from Washington, D.C. about the future security of our nation, mm-hmm. and how K-12 education had really flatlined since the 70s. And then these charter schools start to be planted, and we put together an Arizona State Charter School Board. And the idea was to say yes, was to make sure that there's accountability and that we could educate children for less and do it everywhere possible. And today we have all kinds of examples that could be pointed to as some of the finest schools in the nation. I know the Basis school system gets a lot of credit internationally. So does Great Hearts, has 11,000 kid wait list. And then there's charter school after charter school that could be in the same bragging rights as these innovations that have now come to life and have over 250,000 Arizona kids. Over 20% of our children are inside these charter schools, and 28% of our schools are charter schools.
It's really phenomenal. And then they are now innovating more and more, thanks to one of the things that popped you guys up to #1 is this explosion in innovation. Charter schools not just sitting there and going, okay, we're doing it the same way we've always been doing it, which was, by the way, outstanding, but let's create micro schools during COVID to try to serve more people who may not have been able to either have access to online or want to be in their communities, but using their funds and their innovations in different ways.
Well, I'd love to take credit for all of this, but I really have to give credit to the marketplace and to the parents. These are actually moms and dads, and as tough as COVID was and what a stressful time for families, there were some of these ideas that were brought forward on how we can gather children, how we can bring an educator, how we can do it in an affordable and effective way. And 1,000 flowers can bloom beyond this. But micro schools are another innovation that we have in Arizona that we are funding, and that I think give a lot of promise for other things that can happen in the future if we'll get the government out of the way, but have the same objective that our kids are learning something of value in that kindergarten to senior year time frame.
And you know, those parents and teachers, especially across Arizona, everywhere really, you talk about bipartisanship. They don't come to this like, I'm a blank and therefore I like micro schools. They say, I'm a parent and I want options, right? And so you mentioned bipartisanship. You were a part of the leadership of 18 governors who wrote a letter recently to President Biden about this really stunning and kind of shocking, disappointing, like name a few more adjectives, their effort to kind of undermine charters in the public charter grant program. A lot of the schools that I remember meeting in the 90s got started because of that grant program, giving a little boost until the state money could begin to flow. What do you think is happening here with this, suddenly the first administration in history since the inception of charter schools to start opposing them? And what did you guys say in that letter?
Well, first, it's disappointing. I think that it's unacceptable. The last thing we need is a federal charter oversight board. The Department of Education hasn't done all that great in helping the outcomes and results that we're having in our traditional K-12 district schools. And I don't think it was just 18 governors that had an issue with it. I think there were senators, both Republican and Democrat, congressmen and women who said, this is not a good idea or use of time. So I do smell politics at play here. But I think if we'll let the states be laboratories of democracy, and Jeannie, you're absolutely right, this is nonpartisan. Parents want their kids to have a great education in a supportive environment. And I do think looking at the model and where it works, we can reinforce that. But looking where we have gaps, we can look to new ideas. And in many ways, the United States never really solves a problem. It innovates out of that problem. And that's what I think school choice gives us the opportunity to do.
That's such a great way to say it. We do innovate out, and when we have let the states be as independent as they need to be, we end up getting laws like Arizona's, which has allowed so many students to thrive. And you mentioned charters are just one part of what is an important formula for all parents to have access to meaningful opportunities for students where they can personalize the education. You all created the opportunity for people to take monies to private schools.
Yes.
And that was extraordinary. Wondering what you think of this idea. Would you ever think about or advance the concept of maybe like think about all the money, and you mentioned money should follow students.
Yes.
Take all the money that's allocated for state education, right? Give 2/3 of it to the parents to pay for their kids' education anywhere. Give the other third to them for their bank account and let them use it for whatever their students need.
I'm all for this idea of what we would call backpack funding in Arizona, of getting the money to the parent. I think in too many of these discussions, the debate becomes how much are we spending? And we do need to spend. We do need to invest, and money and budgets are a part of this. But the amount of spending is not the measurement of success. If it were, some of the largest school system in the country that are failing are actually the highest funding.
Right.
So we should be looking for that return on investment. And I do think that parents are very good consumers. If you look at some of the wait lists in Arizona, they're for the best and most rigorous schools. Now, this is a first come, first serve, free public education. And parents want their child to be in there. And it breaks my heart that because of a lottery or because of a zip code or because of a line, their child is not in there, because we both know what a difference that would make. So the idea of, one, the investment in what we need right now, which is our young people getting a better education, and then opening their mind to what is next. When you and I were in high school, there's a class called SHOP. It's where a lot of people found their purpose and turned it into a passion and then a paycheck. For one reason or another, that went away for some time, and we thought that everyone would matriculate into a 4-year university with a liberal arts degree or go into the business world, and that's just not where people are. In fact, 80% of the jobs in Arizona, we have high-tech, high-paying jobs everywhere, but they're in that career and technical education. It's where people can take on less debt if they choose to go for higher learning, get a certificate, get to work. It's a great way also to launch a business and become an entrepreneur. So I think this idea of giving parents more charge over those dollars, as long as they're going for investment into the child and the family, then I'm all for additional spending, because then it truly is an investment.
Right, exactly. Well, our mutual friend Michael Crow, the head of Arizona State University,
We're very lucky to have him
oh
in
my
Arizona.
gosh, so innovative. But he says it's not college or career; it's both, because career needs levels of higher education, and so higher education doesn't have to be a 4-year college, a 2-year. It doesn't have to be brick and mortar. Kind of like we've seen in chartering, it could be getting a certificate for that kind of industry that is coming to Arizona. So you're absolutely right. There are so many variations.
In many ways, Michael Crow has been a leader on this theme of lifelong learning and making it convenient and easy for the learner, whether it's on campus, whether it's online. ASU pioneered many of those programs.
Yeah.
And in many ways, Arizona State University, University of Arizona under Bobby Robbins, and the Northern Arizona University, along with our community colleges, have been our secret sauce in winning these relocations and investments of company headquarters, because not only are they training the talent pool for the workforce of tomorrow, they're taking available workers who want to make more money, want to reskill and upskill, and providing a place for them where in an affordable way they can work on their career while getting that education.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And sort of that pre-K through higher ed continuum, there are great schools around the country, many of them charters, many of them independent, more innovative school districts, that say to 4th and 5th graders, not that we're going to track you, but let's start thinking about technology. Let's start thinking about the careers that exist in tomorrow's genre, and let's start thinking about ways for you to have higher education now. There are charter friends of ours that have won recently our Yas Prize and Stop Award that are actually getting kids AA degrees by the time they graduate 12th grade. You have that in Arizona.
Yes.
Or they're coming back and they're working at some of those schools, or students who actually literally are doing kind of apprenticeships at 7th and 8th grade. Our kids today can do so much more than I could do. I don't know.
And these classes that I've been able to visit, and the way the private sector has been involved in some of it, you have some kids that are going into career and technical education, but you've got other kids that are going into software engineering, working side by side on some of these programs, writing code, having fun doing it, and leaving with a real skill, whether they're going to continue their education or go to work the day after graduation.
You mentioned this is a national security issue. That's what Nation at Risk said. Condoleezza Rice has talked about that more recently.
I love how Secretary Rice comes at this from a civil rights issue. And I do think that is the real battle of our time right now at the state level, because there's so many other issues that we deal with as governors and in public policy, that if we got the K-12 component right, it really solves those issues. I mean, think about when you go inside a state prison facility, most of the folks in there can't read at 3rd grade level. So if we get that right, there's all kinds of options for people to make better decisions later in life.
So true. And, so on a final question, let me just raise something you did to try to mitigate any more loss and try to advance this concept of getting K-12 right. We all know it was a tragedy. It is more difficult to even think about it at this point in time, what happened to our kids during COVID. And we know the reasons, right? And we know that there are people working their hearts out, and teachers and educators at all levels. But schools stayed closed a lot longer than any of us would have liked. And the recent Harvard study said that the students who were not in school hardly at all has a 50% learning loss. You introduced a new program, Open for Learning recovery program, where you said that if schools close again and there's not something available to parents, they'll get that funding.
It was time for schools to open. And I want to say, during the pandemic, as difficult as it was, and my heart goes out to all the families, all the teachers, all the administrators that were challenged. We were all doing our best during it. But we did see some unnecessary closings after it was time to get our children back in the classroom. And with that, we used the authorities that we were given through the emergency to get dollars directly to a parent if a school was shutting down. And it what really was our charter system that shined, our charter schools, our Catholic schools, our private schools, and many of our district K-12 schools. But we did see some of the government unions at work. And like I said, you'd like to think people are doing things for the best intentions, but we were talking about kids that were in a totally different risk category. Now there's been learning loss. We want to eliminate that in Arizona. We're going to have a summer camp to catch our kids up. We're committing $100 million to it. We've got 200,000 spots available. But if a school was going to play that game, we were going to get the dollars directly to the parents, let them leapfrog out of that district and go find a place where they could get their kid educated. And the other thing we've done is taken flexible dollars, because it's one thing to have availability to go to a charter school, but if you can't get to the charter school, well, then you could be locked out due to, again, location or transportation. So we put transportation money in there so we can find a way to get that family's child to that charter school if that's where they choose to go.
Well, that's one of the main reasons that, and all the innovations coming around this year, that Arizona is #1 in the charter school law rankings. And that pledge that you made, or that commitment you made to families, is extraordinary. We created a pledge that we want all the other governors to sign on to.
You mean they haven't yet, Jeannie?
They haven't yet. We're working on it, though. So hopefully they'll begin to see what happens when you really devote all that time and energy. And listen, you were inspirational in our creating the YAS Prize for Sustainable, Transformational, Outstanding, and Permissionless Education. We call it the STOP principles for the YAS Prize. We rewarded people who really outperformed during COVID. And yet there wasn't one Arizona finalist in there. So this year we're giving away more than $10 million to education providers who outperform for kids, public, private, charter, community, ed tech. It's agnostic in terms of tax status. So we need you, Governor Ducey, to get us some great applicants from Arizona so that we can make sure they're part of our portfolio this year.
We'll do that. We intend to keep our #1 status. We welcome the competition, and I do think this issue is the issue that would serve governors to focus their time on this. It's the #1 investment line for every state budget in the country, and it's where at the state level we can make the biggest difference. And we come to Washington, D.C. just to let the good folks here know that we don't need their help if they just clear the way for the states to be, like I said, innovations and laboratories of democracy.
It's a great reason to have done that, and then I got a chance to see you and interview you. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your commitment, and especially to kids and families.
Thank you, Jeannie. My
Governor
pleasure.
Ducey, thanks so much for joining me today. In Piazza brings you engaging conversations about education, innovation, and public life twice every month. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at In Piazza Podcast. I'm Jeannie Allen. Thanks for listening. And until next time, ciao.